everything new with this Corona crisis.
We're almost ready to start. We'll wait for just one more minute for some of our last participants to join and their audios to connect, and then I'll start giving some housekeeping mentions, and then we'll kick off.
Okay, it seems that we are. Yes, we are on UN Web TV.
Awesome.
Great. So let's use that as a kickoff. Before I introduce myself, if you've just joined as a guest, you will notice that you're muted and will remain as such. And so also all of our speakers, you can mute yourself as well to keep the audio as crisp as possible. And if you're also a guest, we ask you to turn off your video. And a suggestion to improve the experience throughout the session is, if you're looking at Zoom through either the speaker view or the grid view, if you hover your mouse over any of the dark screens that has the white name, you'll be able to see a blue button with 3 dots, and that will give you the option of hide non-video participants. And what that will do is only show some of the speakers that we'll be addressing today. So it'll give you a more intimate experience, and that will improve the process throughout the session. And again, if you are a guest, we ask you to turn off the videos. With that being said, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Martin Weinstein. I run the Open Innovation Lab at Yale University. And it is a project that we started 2 years ago to design and spin off bold open source technology projects designed to address some of our planet's grand challenges, such as climate change, but more than anything, asking constantly, how can we better use digital technology to enhance the power of collaboration? And collaboration framed as perhaps the most important technology that we have as a civilization. And that's actually quite timely for this conversation, this event today, this special day, and this shocking 2020. Like with climate change, the COVID pandemic has made us face a common invisible threat. We now stand facing a transformational change of the world as we know it. And more than anything, it forces us to be aware of how deeply interconnected we all are to ourselves and to our planet. Now, in terms of connectivity, digital technology has been crucial in helping us become a globalized civilization, but not yet fully interconnected, where we can operate as a system where the total is more than the sum of the parts. And I think that's also one of the key challenges. How do we ensure that digital technology serves that purpose for us, starting with inclusivity, radical inclusivity. And that is also key for today's session, where we can envision what the next 75 years of the United Nations can look like, engaging all global society as united planetary citizens. I will share later on in the session a bit of some of our work on collective action and collaborative power around climate change and the development of integrated trusted climate accounting systems using emerging digital technology in the context of a project called Open Climate and the Open Climate Collabathon. Before that, and as we're preparing that for November, I'd love to give the floor to my esteemed colleague and collaborator, Miroslav Polcer, for his opening remarks. Miroslav, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Martin. Dear friends, dear colleagues, welcome to the All of Society Digital Cooperation for Global Goals and Climate Action webinar in commemoration of the 75th anniversary of the signing of the Charter of the United Nations. My name is Miroslav Polzer, and I'm the founder and CEO of IAAI, the International Association for the Advancement of Innovative Approaches to Global Challenges, a United Nations accredited civil society organization headquartered in Klagenfurt in Austria. We are happy and proud to co-host this UN 75 webinar together with the Yale Open Innovation Lab, UN Habitat Youth Program, UNESCO Management of Social Transformations Program, the International Youth Conference, the Climate Change Coalition, the eThekwini Municipality City of Durban, the NGO Committee on Sustainable Development New York, and the Glotcher Global Challenges Foundation New York. With our UN 75 webinar, we want to celebrate our interdependence as a global human family and to thank all those who have worked through all these years for the global common good within the UN system and beyond. In addition to the celebration of past accomplishments, this webinar aims also to have a pathfinder function for the future development of the UN system. In the last 75 years, the world has changed significantly. The nature of global challenges has changed, and people all over the world, more than ever before, feel united in a community of destiny, challenged by the climate change crisis, the health crisis caused by COVID-19, and many other threats to global peace and well-being. The organizers of the All of Society Digital Cooperation for Global Goals webinar want to use the momentum of the UN 75 celebration and the recent presentation of the roadmap for digital cooperation and the UN data strategy for action for everyone, everywhere by the United Nations Secretary General. And we want to envision new digitally empowered futures for the United Nations system in which all of society and especially youth and the local communities will be engaged in a meaningful and rewarding manner. For this future-oriented discussion, we have organized this webinar to create a virtual forum to collaboratively reflect on the current operating system of global community and to envisage new avenues for the enhanced mobilization of action and resources of non-state actors for better delivery of public good on local and global level, guided by the Sustainable Development Goals, our beloved Agenda 2030. And speaking of mobilization of action and resources of youth, I am delighted to give the floor to Ali Mustafa, our youth delegate in the context of the UN Department for Global Communication Youth Program. He is also a youth program consultant of our cooperation partner Friendship Ambassadors Foundation and organizer of the International Youth Conference 2020, which has been an exceptional success and a demonstration of how digital innovation can empower youth to engage in the work of the United Nations. Ali, over to you.
Thank you, Miro, and welcome to everyone who is watching online.
Ali, can you turn on your video?
Actually, I have a very bad internet connection, so I'll prefer go with the audio.
Okay.
So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Miro, for inviting me to speak, and thank you everyone who's watching online on the web TV and on the Zoom. And I would like to welcome everyone who is watching anywhere in the world on the Facebook or Twitter, who has joined this all important conversation that we have organized in the observance of the UN Charter Day, 75th UN Charter Day. And as Miro mentioned, that I'm the youth representative to the United Nations Department of Global Communications, and previously have been the co-chair of the 68 youth co-chair for the 68 United Nations Civil Society Conference. And at the conference, I would like to mention that as this webinar is in the context of the digital cooperation and the climate action, and as being representing the voices of the youth over here, I would like to start with mentioning the Youth Climate Compact that we formulated last year and announced in the Salt Lake City with the cooperation of the United Nations Department of Global Communication Civil Society Unit, and the youth all around the world. That document is a key document for the individuals to act on the climate action and how the cooperation can be done between the individuals and the group of people, and how other people can support us, including the state actors, non-state actors, the civil society, individuals. So it's available to see what the Youth Climate Compact is on the website. If you can just go on the Google and write the Youth Climate Compact, you will find the link, and you can see what the Youth Climate Compact is. And you can see how young people have created that document and how important that document is, and how easy it is for the individuals and the group of people to act upon it. So I urge all the young people who are watching, and not only young, the other people also, they can just start acting upon it, and especially during the time when everything is in crisis. The development have been slowed down, and people are working remotely, and everything is new during such times. Being a young person myself, we all have suffered somehow. Some got affected by the virus, and even people who did not get affected by the virus, they did get affected by the lockdown or the economic crisis that is going on. Many people, they lost their jobs. Many people are suffering from depression, and many other things that are going on. In such times, the technology is playing a very important role, a very key role in keeping people together. Not just keeping people together, technology is helping everyone to move forward with development. This webinar is an example of this such cooperation between the state actors and the non-state actors, that the civil society, the people from civil society from all around the world have come together to watch us and have a conversation on this important topic on this important day. So we can see that this digital cooperation is very much important in terms of moving forward with the progress and development. And besides that, we should not forget that there are people around the world who does not have access to the internet, and they are in majority also. And I hope that in this webinar, the speakers and the contributors will also think of the way how to make technology accessible to such people, especially young people in countries and communities in such areas where they do not have access to the internet, and they are facing extreme issues, and the issues that are maybe still unknown to us. So I hope that contributors will talk about and think about the ways to get the technology to such people and get our message across to such people who do not have access to technology. And this is what the digital cooperation is all about. Thank you so much, Mira.
Thank you very much, Ali, for being the voice of the youth and for your leadership. And with this, we come to Douglas Reagan, who is a great youth empowerer with the UN Habitat program on youth and urban livelihoods. And he is also one of the main partners of this webinar, and made it also possible that we are on the UN Web TV platform today. And Doug, over to you, and thanks for everything. You have to unmute yourself.
Unmute. There we go.
Perfect.
Technology. It's a lovely thing. Anyways, thanks so much for inviting me. Really honored to be here. I'm calling in from Nairobi, Kenya. And as we were chatting just before we started, it's definitely during this time, this very challenging time for many people, we see that the use of technology is critical to make sure all voices are heard. And I hope that we continue on the way, along the way, as we move forward through this COVID crisis, but then onwards to assure that people are heard, that no one is left behind. So also have to say happy 75th birthday to the United Nations. This is a really important time, I think, to celebrate and, you know, say, wow, we have really come a long way. And if you watch some of the amazing videos and such that they're out there, right, being put out there right now, I know there was a lot of other things being planned for this time, and it's unfortunately we all can't get together. But nonetheless, I think it's important to celebrate, but it's also important to reflect. And I just, if you notice my background here, this is a mural in Mathare, Mathare, the informal settlement or slum in Nairobi. It's done by some of the youth groups we're working with here around the youth-led emergency COVID-19 response. And what we see, and this is the non-tech side of it, is that these young people have come forward. Currently, they were the first people in early March to say, we have to do something. We have to take control. We have to show our power in protecting our communities. So they came forward to us and said, we need to put hand washing stations in. We seem to educate people. So now we're, 3 months in, they've washed over 500,000 hands across the informal settlements of Kenya and also East Africa. And they're doing an amazing job. And these murals, which have hit the media all over the place, people love them, are there. So again, these young people, oftentimes what happens though is that these young people, they're not heard. Because they live in informal settlements, as I think was just mentioned, not everybody's online. And so their messages and the great work they're doing is missed. So I think this is an example of how we have an opportunity to make sure we listen to these young people. We have an opportunity to make sure that we use technology properly. We can't, when we're looking at, in the last 5 years, we've had 2 movements, one for women and now Black Lives Matter. These 2 movements around women and people of color that are critical and they've put forward saying, it's no longer good enough to say that it's a great idea and we promise to do something. They want action now. And I can absolutely guarantee you that the young people who make up in 1.8 billion people of the world, who in the informal settlements make up 1 billion people in the world, they want to be heard, and then they have something to say and they have something to do. So hopefully we can do that. Thank you. And I look forward to the rest of the conversation.
Excellent. And perhaps also as a background information is that my organization has helped forming a digital innovation community at the Conference of the Parties, COP25 climate change conference in Madrid last year. And there, Doug was also one of the founding members, and we are planning several joint activities over the coming months. And with this, we come to the next great leader in building bridges between the youth of the world and the United Nations system. It's Hawa Diallo, our friend from the Department for Global Communication, Civil Society Unit. Hawa, please tell us what are your thoughts on this important celebration of 75th anniversary?
Sure. Hello, everybody. Happy UN 75, but also happy UN Charter Day, which is today, commemorating the signing of the UN Charter. Hawa Diallo from the Department of Global Communications, specifically working with civil society engagement with a really big focus on youth. So I guess, really what I want to say is that youth engagement through various means is really core to our work. And then, use of technology to reach out to young people is something that we've been working on steadily to improve. And I think we've faced some of the challenges that Doug and some other people have mentioned, that not everybody is connected. I'm specifically concerned in connecting with young people in rural areas who may not even have internet or radio. How do we work with civil society on the ground to serve as anchors to get the message and the connectivity person to person or through their means with those people who are voiceless. So I hope that, we'll hear a bit about that in the conversation today. but also the, post this event that some, further emphasis will be placed on how we can work together in terms of facilitating and encouraging digital cooperation. Now, one thing that I want to do in working differently, because all of us around this table talk about it a lot, that we must have young people online or in the room or at the table. I've talked maybe for about a minute or so, a minute or two, so I actually want to share my intervention with a young lady who is empowered, is leading the work that we're doing in the civil society world, Erlene Cruz. So more and more, I want to step away from the screen, as beautiful as I may look,
Yes.
and give my space to young people. So I'd really kindly appreciate if you can beam in on Erlene Cruz, and she'll finish my conversation and say a lot more interesting things than I would. Over. Thank you. So maybe Erlene can unmute herself. I see her there.
I'm unable to unlock my video. If the host can please facilitate that. There we are. Hi, good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everyone. Thank you so much, Hawa, for once again, after many times giving me the floor, as is customary with people like you and many in the room. It's an honor to be here with many colleagues, Ali as well. So thank you so much. As Hawa mentioned, I serve on the Youth Steering Committee of the UN Department of Global Communications, and I also direct a project called Kitchen Connection. And this project hosts online interactive cooking classes that are all globally focused. Now, I'm biased and think food is the most important thing ever. And I also know that food is cross-cutting a lot of the SDGs. So, I came to Hawa with this notion that it would be great to partner with the department way back in 2016 and to integrate it into the work of the unit. But before I got to talking about what I wanted to do, Hawa asked me, what is the United Nations? And I wasn't ready to answer that, but I think, she was happy with the answer, and we were able to move forward. And, she wasn't asking me from, an objective standpoint, what is it and what is the history of it, but what does it mean to you? And to me, it's exactly what we're doing. It's coming together, it's discussing, it's convening, it's sharing ideas at its core. And so, that really began a wonderful journey for myself personally and professionally. Together with the department, hosted many events at New York University, online, together students in Nigeria and students in Brazil. We've traveled to many conferences where we've hosted events focusing on the impacts of climate change on the food system, as well as the impacts of the food system on climate change and that symbiotic nature that it has. I had the honor of collaborating with Ali and many other Youth Steering Committee members on the Youth Climate Compact. And that was a wonderful effort because it brought youth from Colombia to Somalia together to consult in what was to be their document. And I think that that was, for me, the epitome of our work as a steering committee, bringing together people to really, have their voices heard. It was really bringing down the barriers. Obviously, internet was required, but, the steering committee really made an effort to host things in person. So there were events that were hosted locally. While the UN Civil Society Conference was taking place, there were simultaneous events happening across the world and bringing young people together. So that, among so many other opportunities, are reasons why I and the steering committee is eternally grateful to have a space at the table. And this moment is emblematic of it. So thank you so very much.
Amira, if I may mention, I forgot to say that I put in the chat, because we are celebrating UN Charter Day. Please join the DGC Steering Committee in supporting the UN 75 team and log on and take a photo. They're using technology to focus on the charter and to highlight what the charter means in these 17 years, these 75 years that we're celebrating. So I hope that I'll see everybody on social media. Thanks so much for having us. Over.
Thank you very much, Harvey and Erlene. Wonderful having you with us, and also thanks for the example of a digital tool that builds bridges between the people of the world and the UN system and the 75th anniversary. And as we are talking about all of society becoming engaged in global goals implementation, it's of course civil society organizations are a very important pillar, and we have with us really a force of nature, a real leader there, Margot Lazaro from the NGO Committee on Sustainable Development New York, and also the partner of the UN 2020 initiative, and also a co-founder of the SDGs Impact Awards. Margot, please share with us your thoughts and your information about your innovative initiatives.
Oh, thank you so much, Mero. Hello, everyone. Hawa, Ali, Arlene, it's a pleasure to see you all today, and happy UN Charter Day. I'm Margot Lazaro, President and Chair of the NGO Committee on Sustainable Development, co-founder of the SDG Impact Awards, and a coordinating partner for UN 2020. And we have a motto. You've asked me to cover quite a bit of territory here, so I'm going to do it as quickly as I can, Mero. We have a motto with the NGO Committee on Sustainable Development: turn your passions into actions for change. And we believe the 17 Sustainable Development Goals are our best blueprint to for going forward. We develop programs in partnership with all stakeholders, including member states, UN officials, civil society, private sector, and academia. Of course, we all see the tremendous value and contributions of being open to innovations in technology. As Ali mentioned, we are experiencing today with this webinar, we're all coming together from different areas around the world, and we're saving carbon emissions, but we are coming through technology. So we encourage you all to step up. If you see a problem, you could very well be the person to initiate the necessary sustainable solutions for that. But I encourage you to look into seeing how you can do that by building partnerships. Considering the current global issues, it is interesting that the UN we're on a pause, but the UN declared 2020 is the beginning of the decade of action to achieve the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, to leave no one behind. So we recently, as Mira mentioned, launched with my co-founder, the SDG Impact Awards. And we created this to inspire everyone to engage in the SDGs with opportunities to share their initiatives. And we welcome you all to participate and submit your concepts to at least inspire action and hope, so that we can become back stronger and better. So, and on behalf of the NGO Committee on Sustainable Development in New York, it has been my honor to be an active coordinating partner of UN 2020. UN 2020 initiatives aims to provide a platform to promote cooperation and a dialogue among civil society groups and campaigns in collaboration with national authorities, the UN, other stakeholders, to support a people-centered multilateralism. And in January 2017, UN 2020 facilitated discussions since that time with member states and the Secretariat, and for the need for success. Well prepared for the UN 75 anniversary commemorations for the United Nations, taking place in September 21st this year. This would be including a promise for a stakeholder review, strengthening to strengthen the organization. Shortly after the President of the General Assembly appointed the permanent representatives of Qatar and Sweden last February as the co-facilitators for the negotiations of the 75th Political Declaration, I was a member of the UN 2020 delegation that met with the Ambassador Al-Thani and also the Ambassador Enstrom to ensure the inputs of civil society would be included in the co-facilitators negotiations for the 75th political declaration. And so it was to be adopted by the member states for the high-level event happening in September. So since the COVID crisis has happened, there have been regular meetings, mostly via webinars and so forth. And we have actually co-hosted the UN 75th People's Forum, which was for the UN We Need, and it was May 14th and 15th. We had 600 attendees, and it was of course over those 2 days. It was a YouTube. It was on YouTube. It was a Facebook Live. But we actually were able to present the President of the General Assembly with our own document for the humanity and crossroads going forward for solutions for global challenges. So we're proud to have had that accomplished. He did share it with the member states, which we're happy about. And we just recently received a video from the Secretary General acknowledging our efforts to include civil society and open up a space for dialogues to happen for possibly the inclusion in the 75th anniversary. So on that note, I do want to just say thank you for inviting us to be a part of this today. I don't want to take any more time. I know we had a short window to say all of that. I hope I got as much in as I could, and that I look forward to the dialogue coming up later. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Marco, for being with us and also being a partner of today's event and a leader of civil society at the UN. And with this, we come to another pillar of all of society engagement in global goals implementation. These are local communities. And we are proud and happy to have the eThekwini municipality, the city of Durban, as our partner here. It's really amazing how your municipality is active in international fora and really breaking down global goals to local action. Mr. Eric Applegreen, Head of International Governance and Relations, welcome, and please take the floor.
Can you hear my mic? Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, but if you could come closer to the mic, it's low volume.
And now, can you hear me?
Yes, it's better now, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thanks Miro, and sorry, excuse my dogs. I'm sitting in the back of my yard and I've got 3 dogs and I'm sitting under a mango tree. So if the dogs bark, I will just try and keep them quiet. But just to say, yeah, thank you for inviting us. And I think, you know, the work that you're doing, first we'd like to really recognize the work that you're all doing, empowering young people. And also a happy 75th anniversary, everybody. But what is very significant about today as well is that South Africa, we used the tenets of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights to come up with what we call the Freedom Charter. And today in South Africa, we commemorate the Freedom Charter. It's a document that basically formed the basis of the new constitution that we unveiled in 1994, when all South Africans had the vote. Black and white, men and women, equal vote. And we're very proud of that. But just to say some of the contributions that we would like to make at this webinar and beyond is to say how do we get city governments and civil society to have strategic partnerships in one is including young people in the governance of the city, making sure that young people and all sectors of society are included in those initiatives that the city is grappling with, both in terms of adaptation and mitigation around climate change. And I think we've got a lot of case studies that we would like to share going forward as to how we've done that. And we've always made our mayor a champion of a lot of our climate change initiatives. And our mayor has given very good leadership on the city's tackling climate change. And that kind of leadership and values and principles have been translated now under the COVID-19 strategy, where we've had a decisive, focused, and really ethical type of leadership, and leadership that listens to science. And I think that's something that young people need to also understand, that the voice of young people are important, but also never stop listening to oral histories, the history of the older people and the history and knowledge of the scientists, both in terms of climate change, but more importantly around with COVID-19 on, which is the current pandemic that's affecting all of us globally. But you know, one of the other important things that I also like to mention is that we've got to focus on young women. You know, on our continent, from Durban's point of view, we would like to be used as a platform to continue the discussions and debates. But we have a huge challenge with our legacy of women not being fully represented and participating in the governance of cities and in the government of countries generally. I know it's a global problem, but we've got to tackle the issue of including women and young people in the governance of a city. And we in Durban are very cognizant of the fact that gender-based violence is a serious problem in our society. It's even more serious now that during the lockdown, women are finding it very difficult to get away from some of the abuses. So one of the interesting case studies I would like to focus on, not now, but is what we call the Ocean Champs. It's an innovative program between our sister city in Bremen in Germany and the Tegueni municipality, where we've basically trained young people to be champions to protect our ocean. So there's a number of ideas that we would like to share going forward as to how government and civil society work together, because no government, be it a city, regional or state government, can govern on its own. And any challenge that you face, if you don't include civil society, you just delay or frustrate the ability to have a more positive outcome on that initiative. So from Durban's side, we would like to share models of good practice around environmental protection, around urban safety, around gender-based violence issues, around a number of, and one of the key things that we're battling with at the moment is economic recovery. And there's a lot of young people that are participating in the informal economy, the formal economy, in small business, in technology businesses. And we've got to find innovative ways of how do we help our economies recover, and in particular, the young people that are in those various businesses that need recovery and support. I'd like to stop there.
Thank you very much, Eric. It's really amazing how creative and innovative you are working, and we wish you that you will get through the COVID crisis also strengthened, and that the recovery process will also be an opportunity for innovative progress on the field of youth empowerment and especially young women's empowerment. And with this, I will give back the moderation to Martin, and very much looking forward to this block of keynote presentations. Now we have really outstanding experts. Martin, over to you, and be expected to have wonderful presentations now.
Thank you, Miroslav, and thank you everyone from those extremely powerful, warm remarks. We'll move on to some of our keynote speakers today, and we'll start with Jovan Kurbalia from the Diplo Foundation in Geneva, who will speak about multi-stakeholder governance innovation and the lessons learned from the Internet Governance Forum. Jovan, great to have you here, and please go ahead, the floor is yours. One second.
Now it seems that it works better than when I'm unmuted. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Miro. It's really great to be today here addressing your group. I don't know a lot about you, but I know that whatever Miro is doing is extremely relevant, interesting, and timely. Now, what I will try to reflect today is on a few aspects on the interplay between UN and digital. I will focus on what you gave me as a task on inclusive multilateralism and experience from Internet Governance Forum, but I will also reflect on this birthday occasion on a few issues about digital and the UN, which is sort of a zoom out view. Let me just reflect on one interesting aspect. As you can see, my office is based in the building of WMO. Today I went for a lunch and I met one of the scientists in climate change, and I told him, well, it's great, climate change problem is becoming to some extent addressed, if not solved, with the lack of the less activities with the COVID. He said, well, but we have a great problem. I said, what is the problem? Apparently I learned today that each airplane, commercial airplane, is equipped with the special sensors that collect information about atmosphere and climate change. Therefore, WMO has less information about climate change developments. Obviously, it was a bit of cynical answer. They are trying to solve it in other way. But what is main point today in my intervention is that we have to step back, to think with the clarity of mind, to look for paradoxes, delicate trade-offs, and use this unique situation to move forward and solve some old problems that we have been carrying for quite some time. Or what is often said, do not waste the crisis. My point is, and I will share with you, you don't need to watch me because you saw who I am. I'm a real person, I'm not a robot. I will share with you a few images that are basically relevant for our discussion today. And one is this historical image of the signing in San Francisco of the UN Charter. It happened 75 years ago, and it is always good occasion to reflect on what we have learned and to reflect on the past in order to see forward ahead of us. And one of the most powerful first sentences, we the people of the United Nations. Now the question is, who are we the people today? Are we represented? Are we included? Are our interests addressed? Do we have a place, very simple place, where, for example, each of us in this chat, in this webinar, can address his or her problems online? From hacking to removing of the images on the Facebook or Google, to the problem of access to PayPal in many developing countries or e-commerce. Unfortunately, as we discussed it today, there is no place where we can address these issues. There is no digital home for humanity. This is bad news. Now let me bring some good news. UN Secretary General, since he was elected, took the question of digital very high on his agenda. As you know, he's engineer by training. He established UN high-level panel on digital cooperation. And on 11th of June, he basically issued the roadmap for digital cooperation. And I strongly advise all of you to consult this document, because it is going to be one of the key documents ahead of us for interplay between digital and United Nations, including question of environment. Ultimately, we have to create a space, we have to create a digital home for humanity, where our calls, when I say ours, citizens, civil society, businesses, and countries can be addressed. Let me just bring you one very concrete example, how difficult situation is currently. Contact tracing apps are the apps that you basically download on your mobile, and you can find if you have powerful enough mobile, which is a problem in many countries, if the person with whom you are in physical contact, in proximity, has the COVID virus. There are initiatives between Apple, Google, EPFL University in Switzerland, a lot of discussion on privacy. Very few countries are involved. And I receive many calls from our alumni, for example, in small island states. People are asking, where should we go to discuss question of privacy, standardization, cybersecurity, and contact tracing apps? Now, mind you, all countries in the world, all governments are keen to contain the pandemics and to restart economic and social life. Therefore, there is political unanimity, which is not a common point. But there is no place where you can discuss how to do it. Well, WHO is doing fantastic work on the health issues. Therefore, there is a missing place and space to discuss it. This is the first point which I would suggest, and I don't think that the UN should become another Silicon Valley. There are these hackathons, high-tech issues. UN should be the place where humanity should meet technology, where technology should be adjusted to the needs of humanity. Challenges are huge. I'll just give you one example. Only 5% of Wikipedia entries about Africa are edited by people who are based in Africa. This is a really almost shocking example. How a little knowledge input we have. In this case, I can bring you other examples, but we have to address serious issues on question of environment, climate, knowledge, and wide range of the issues. Now back to inclusion. And the second, therefore, the first part is, can we have digital home to address policy development, economical, human rights, and other issues, especially in the context of SDGs. But the second issue, second aspect is, can we use advanced digital tools to basically connect, in this case, concerns of local community meeting in Kenya and meeting in the United Nations. Internet Governance Forum, which was established about 15 years ago, started experimenting from very early days with so-called remote hubs. Now, all of you experience webinars, Zoom, and this thing, but let's say till 3 or 4 years ago, it was a huge innovation. And what we've been doing at the Internet Governance Forum, we are basically having the global meeting. The last one was held in Berlin, but also remote hubs, where people get together around the table and discuss their local concern or priority or issue, whether it is privacy, whether it is environment and digital, involvement of youth, inclusion, and then they listen the discussion at the Internet Governance Forum, pose the questions, and then get that discussion to their local concerns, conclusions. And it's a very powerful model because it links what is going on the ground to the global discussions. Now, we've been promoting it for a long, long time. Miro knows how many presentations I did on these issues, but people were saying, okay, that's fine. But now one collateral advantage, if I can call it, of the COVID-19 crisis is that people realize that they can discuss online, and that could be facilitator of the great inclusion. One of the complaints of big 5 countries in the UN, for example, is that there is equalizing power of online media. This is the framework, how it works, this all setup of the meetings, with online meetings, with hybrid meetings, with on-site meetings. Therefore, we are now with the COVID-19 entering into the phase where we can maximize on the online technology. It won't happen just by itself. It requires action from the organizations, for the youth organization, from other actors. But the possibilities are huge, and opening is unique. The door will be open, in my view, for a few months, maybe till the end of the year, and then organization will start to get back to the normal routine, and inclusion of civil society, youth, and other actors may not be a priority. Therefore, there is a need to use this opening. I know that in the UN, in the leadership of the UN, in Secretary General Office, there is a strong and genuine will to use digital technology for inclusion, and that should be also used. Now, I will just close with one issue that has been on my mind for quite some time during this crisis, and I'll just pose as challenging closing remark, not to wrap up discussion, but just to have a closing remark. We have UN building in New York, in Geneva. We have national parliaments. Those are public spaces. Those are spaces which are owned by UN, by Swiss Parliament, Austrian, Kenyan, and other places, where people gather and discuss public policy issues. We are now shifting online, and most of our interactions are happening on the proprietary software. In this case, Zoom, but there is FedEx, there is Vote Chinese, Tencent platform. And this issue has to be addressed. Can we afford, as global community, to discuss public policy issues on the proprietary platforms? Is there a need to create open source platform for online meetings? Open source that will be accessible to anyone, adjusting to anyone, from the UN to local community. Those are issues that I would say we have to address if we want to meet and to realize Agenda 2030 in all its aspects. But inclusion is one of the key. Inclusion understood in the comprehensive way, not only access to network, but affordability, multilingual inclusion, scientific inclusion, that we don't have only 5% of inputs on Wikipedia done by people from African continent about themselves. Therefore, there are various aspects of inclusion, and I think this is a challenge for all of us, and especially for your community, which is galvanizing civil society and youth input into this process. We have unique situation, we have unique opening, and there are a lot of possibilities. We can discuss it later on, how it can be done practically. But we have to find the digital home for the humanity, and we have to use digital tools to make more inclusive and more effective global governance. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Jovan, for those very well articulated and eloquent words on the evolution of the digital revolution that we've seen now for over decades. And with that, a perfect segue into our next keynote speaker, Vienna Louis, from winner of the UN Reboot the Earth with Bowl Eco and Koala Global, part of Stanford Codex and Zero Degree Project. Vienna will speak around envisioning a digitally empowered economic system for a sustainable world. Very delighted to have you, Vienna, here, and a perfect transition from Jovan's words. Please go ahead, Vienna, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Martin. So I like to start by presenting a picture of that I just saw yesterday. It's actually a video of a Malaysian girl who, because she didn't have enough internet connection, she had to climb on top of a tree to take her tests for 24 hours. And this happened in Borneo, Malaysia. And I really thought about like my experience spending time with the indigenous people in Malaysia, where I got the precious gift of working alongside them, trying to protect their land before it's lost to logging companies. And what I discovered that was unexpected for me is I've never experienced a night that dark. And there was a trip to the outhouse that I was trying to go to, where like there's no electricity, there's no road, there's no phone signal anywhere, but the sounds of millions of insects and howling sounds that actually reminds me of tigers and was all I heard. And what I felt in that moment was fear. And on my way back from the outhouse, I finally let go of my fear. I surrendered to nature. And what I felt was a kind of peace that I actually never felt before. And that was the day I learned of the beauty of surrendering and how to learn from the indigenous people. I felt like prior to that, my attempts of going into the rainforest have always felt like trying to imperialize them with whatever knowledge I know of. So that questioning of like, what is development after all, sets me off on like an upstream problem solving journey from Malaysia all the way to Silicon Valley. And years later, I find myself presenting at UC Berkeley with my startup, working on a sustainable alternative to blockchain. And last year, during the Youth Climate Summit, I found myself speaking in front of the UN after winning the UN Climate Change Hackathon. And I was promised funding and, more importantly for me, representation in the Economic and Social Council. I later hear that the corporate sponsors decided to use the funding to run more hackathons instead. So this brought up a lot of issues for me. But the short conclusion for myself is that I kind of arrived at where Greta arrived at, and that's at how the current climate crisis cannot be solved within today's structure. And what I want to experiment with all of you today is asking okay, if we can't solve it using yesterday's structure, what can the new system look like? This is, I don't know if I will have time to run through all this, but this is actually a temperature algorithm that, thanks to Dr. Sharik at Stanford 0 Degree Project, that we have used to understand our own impact. For example, just our own meeting on Zoom here today would have had certain contribution to the temperature already. And this is an example of how we would calculate okay, what is our temperature impact for the day? And what I wanted to remind all of us is that we are accountable. And even though our temperature increment today might not look significant, it is important that it is not neutral, to understand that the more financial power you have in the current financial paradigm, the more you are actually heating up the earth, because it does depend on how you are or are not participating in powers that are derived from destroying the planet, like fossil fuel, for example. And the other important variable is, aside from capital, is time. So what is important about the time variable is that it does level the playing field between the big and small players, because what action you can take today is exponentially more impactful than tomorrow. And the most important one that I wanted to also highlight today is that with distributed ledger technology, we can see that there's a whole ton of players in the DAO ecosystem. I won't go into the toolkits that's available right now, but it's sufficient to say that works like Martin, what Miro is doing, all this are contributing to people being able to self-organize. And that is basically leading to our own challenge of how can we, as 7.6 billion people, who's actually creating 7.6 billion hours that is heating up the earth right now, redirect that 7.6 billion hour to one that is a temperature reducing hour, like a cooling hour. So that, for me, is where I see the end of climate change, is when we can coordinate with one another and have 7.6 billion 0 degree hours. And if you're interested to play that game with me, I would be very happy to collaborate with you. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Vienna. I'm inspired by your stories and by everything you've shared. Please continue doing your work onwards. We now move on to our third keynote speaker. I think that each keynote keeps getting better and better. Our next keynote speaker is John Crowley from Unesco MOST. He will be speaking about global public sector innovation empowered by digital innovation. John, if you're able to turn off your video, that would allow us to bring you online, and feel free, you are ready to unmute, and please go ahead, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Martin, for the moderation. Thanks, Miro, for inviting me to participate in this meeting. I'm not sure I can keep the curve rising in terms of the quality of interventions, but if it's a bell curve, then just call it regression to the norm if I'm below the quality of previous speakers. The title, I think there are two different titles actually that have been given to me in various versions of the program. One focusing more specifically on public institutions, and the other focusing more on social transformations in general. I'll try to combine the two perspectives in this short talk. In UNESCO, which is where I work, as you know from the program, my job is to run one of UNESCO's science programs, which is called the Program on the Management of Social Transformations. So social transformations is my entry point. And I think the simplest way of putting it, to give you the conclusion, and then I'll talk around the conclusion, is that the potential of digital technologies to be profoundly transformative is enormous and very largely unexploited, particularly in public institutions, particularly perhaps in the UN system. Because the default model for deploying digital technologies in institutions, particularly traditional 20th century bureaucracies that are still channeling a lot of vibes from the 19th century in the way they organize themselves, that are still basically working from a rule book for what a bureaucracy is and what it is for, that was drafted by Max Weber 120 years ago, is not to transform things, but to find marginally, incrementally more effective ways of doing what they already do. And this has a number of consequences. First consequence, it obviously doesn't unlock the transformative potential. I'll give some examples of this in a moment. But secondly, by seeking incremental improvements in things already being done through the application of new technological frameworks to those processes of management, of information sharing, of communication, and other approaches, there is a very real risk of creating circumstances that can actually degrade performance. A very good example of this is the impact of digital technologies on jobs, job quality and job satisfaction, for instance. If you simply graph the digital technologies onto previous ways of doing things, there's no guarantee that you will improve what you were doing. You can possibly even make it worse. And that combination of missing out on the potential for radical transformation and the fact that incrementalism doesn't always improve what you're actually doing, because it begs the question of what you should be improving. And you know where I'm going with this. In new public management, when you don't know exactly what to improve in a public institution that doesn't have a clearly defined bottom line, what do you do? Say it with me. Even without turning your mics on, of course, you cut costs. When you don't have any other metric, the default is always reduce costs. And that has consequences which are, among other things, consequences in terms both of the quality of what is delivered and in the understanding of what should be delivered. And I don't have time to talk you through lots of bad examples of bad practice in the public sector. And this is equally true of the corporate private sector, incidentally. Private corporations, particularly of the large, well-established kind, are not necessarily much better at using the genuine transformative potential of digital technologies to make a difference than the public sector is. But we're talking, the title that Miro gave me was more about public institutions than about the private sector. Let's look at some examples of the things that are not really being done, including within the UN system, that could be done through more imaginative deployments of digital technologies that already exist, or directions of development for digital technologies that are on the cusp of existing, but are not being done because of a basic lack of imagination, a basic institutional conservatism about how the technologies are to be deployed. One very good example is knowledge management. In principle, one of the things that digital technologies were supposed to do was to completely transform the way in which knowledge circulates by turning it from basically a hub and spoke model where there are centers of knowledge production that connect to users or consumers of knowledge through disconnected spokes, which don't talk to one another, but each of which establishes a channel between the hub and some specific point on the rim of the wheel, to a model where in principle, every node can be connected directly to every other node in a dimensional space that is much more than two-dimensional, obviously, meaning that there are shorter connections, multiple paths between nodes, and a disappearance of the hub-spoke hierarchy, which means that in principle, any node can be simultaneously a producer and a user of knowledge, and nodes can come together in collaborative mappings that would allow metanodes to emerge, which would be groupings of nodes. This is very familiar. It's the whole point of the internet. It's how the internet is sold ideologically, and it's how, in many respects, it has genuinely transformed the ways in which certain kinds of things circulate. But, I mean, to just take some comparisons, compare the UN system and the music industry. Around 2000, one was being shaken up by technology, and the other was trying to shake itself up by deliberate political program of change called the Millennium Project. Look at that from the vantage point of 2020. How little the UN system has actually changed compared to the music industry. Interesting comparison. To go into detail would take a lot more time, of course, and I'm not sufficiently an expert on the music industry to pontificate about it, but still, the public sector has shown a remarkable ability not to integrate. And in terms of knowledge management, we see that day to day as managers of UN programs. I'm sure many of you on the call have the same experience. We have the technology that would enable us, in principle, to be much more dynamic, radical, transformative, and horizontal in using the knowledge that bubbles up from our own activities, from our connections with our stakeholders, from our partnerships, from our resource mobilization, from our access to the global news community, in order to get things circulating faster and in less predefined paths, and with the assumption, which I think is grounded in some pretty solid economics and sociology of innovation, that faster and less determinate circulation of knowledge and ideas will produce structural serendipity. In other words, the emergence of newness, possibly radically transformative newness, at points that no one could have anticipated, but the structural possibility of which is built into the alternative knowledge circulation model. Then look at a UN institution in 2020 and just wonder how much of this is actually happening. And the answer is barely detectable. If we had the knowledge management equivalent of a seismograph, the needle wouldn't be moving much. Why? What's the blockage? And of course, one of the blockages is the attempt to use the tools to improve the efficiency of what you're doing already, rather than radically rethinking what you're doing in light of the tools that would enable alternative models to emerge. My time is up. So I think that's almost enough. I announced the conclusion. I gave, in the end, only one real illustration of it, but I think it suffices to make the general point that when we're talking about digital transformations, we need to emphasize transformations much more than digital. And remember that the key to digital transformations is typically non-digital issues, including the issues of how institutions imagine themselves. And as we celebrate the 75th anniversary, which is of course an occasion for celebration at one level, it's also an occasion to think about the future. And while the 75th anniversary of a human person would probably be one where the future would be a process of gradual managed decline in the best possible conditions of health and life quality, but with an inevitable, reasonably short-term result. Best scenarios, you might get about a third as much as you've already had in the future. As Hobbes put it in the Leviathan very strikingly, artificial persons do not necessarily have to die. That is the genius. The idea of an artificial person is also the idea of infinite life. The UN system is not condemned to die by some natural biological cycle. But if it is to maintain itself in vitality for the future, it probably can't do it by seeking within the incremental framework marginal improvements on what it already does. There's no guarantee there'll be improvements. And even if there are improvements, they're likely to be trivial compared to the challenges. There are improvements within rules of the game that no longer apply. At some point, you have to shift to a different game. So the question is, what game? And in that respect, I think the challenges, again, and I'll conclude on this, the challenges of digital transformation are not primarily about digital. They're about the non-digital dimensions of institutional, imaginative, cultural, social, bureaucratic transformation. Thank you very much.
Wow, John, thank you so much. You've definitely kept the curve keep going up and articulating some really complex things, because even though we've had a digital process for the last 30 years, its socio-technical transformation seems to still be in its early stages, and particularly as you showcase the importance for decentralization as a key tool that perhaps it leads us to a socio-ecological transformation, helping us reconnect more as a unified society with our planet, and also elucidating that it's not just about technology, it's our capacity to reimagine who we are. What a perfect way to finish our third round of keynotes. Miroslav, my understanding is we're following with Yuping Chang.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
You're now invited to join. Senior Program Officer, Office of the Under Secretary General and Special Advisor on preparations for the 75th UN anniversary, which is what we're celebrating today, in the high-level panel on digital cooperation. If you're online, please.
Yes, I am. Thank you so much, Martin. Thank you so much, Martin. I know it's a little bit of a handful, a mouthful actually, the name of my office. But just to explain that USG Fabrizio Horseshoe, for whom I work, has these two hats. The UN 75 hat, which I'm very glad that everybody has really talked about the importance of the UN and how we reflect on the next few years of our existence, as well as the digital cooperation hat, where we've actually, as Jovan has actually mentioned already, have recently launched the Secretary General's roadmap on digital cooperation. So I really want to talk about perhaps how these two elements come together, especially because we have such a diverse and really inspiring pool of young people coming together to talk about how we can look at technology and digital transformations and digital really as the way forward in terms of bringing us together and achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think I want to start where John actually just sort of left off, where he said that it's not about marginal changes that we need in the UN system. We need a really completely different way of thinking in terms of how we approach digital technology. And this is actually where I think the Secretary General's roadmap and a lot of what Jovan was saying just now really has resonance. It's no longer just about small changes in how we use technology. It's really about a mindset and approach that requires us to effectively harness technology in a broad, overwhelming way, so as to realize its full benefits while mitigating its challenges as well. And I actually think that, in fact, it is about a lot of the technical aspects of digital technology that will allow us to best harness technology for the benefit of all of people around the world and achieve the SDGs. So for instance, even though we ourselves are able to gather here today and connect virtually, there are 3.6 billion people around the world that have no access to the internet and not connected. So these are people mostly in developing countries and poorer countries. For instance, in the LDCs, less than 20% of their population can get online. So these are challenges when it comes to harnessing technology that we really have to address. The very basic notion of achieving universal connectivity, which is something that we take for granted sitting in our nice homes with our ability to Zoom and have these virtual meetings, is not something that we can take for granted for the rest of the world. I think Vienna mentioned this when she gave the example of the student that had to climb the tree to take the test. These are things that are luxuries for people around the world, but are things that we take for granted that allows our economies, our schools, our education system to continue functioning. And in this time of COVID, this is when these realizations and these realities become even more stark. So I think it's something that we should keep in mind, that even as we talk about the wonders of technology, we really need to address how we can bring these technologies to the rest of the world so that all can benefit from it as well. I also want to say one other aspect that I think is very important besides this idea of connectivity is this idea of digital solutions and having these digital solutions reach out to a broad majority of people. So part of the Secretary General's roadmap, for instance, is about harnessing the power of digital public goods. And this is why I think a lot of the young people gathered around here today have the potential to come up with these solutions for global problems and put them forward as digital public goods that can then be made freely available, open source, and ready to be scaled up and used by communities around the world. So the roadmap, the Secretary General's roadmap, talks about the need to promote digital public goods, which is a repository of open information, open solutions to the challenges such as climate change, development, other aspects of city and urban life that could really be opportunities for both contributors like the young people, the young innovators, the technology companies to contribute such solutions that can then be put to the service of the private sector, the governments, and the countries around the world. So this emphasis on digital public goods and the coming together to share information is really something that we're hoping to work towards. I also think that it's important to really also address this issue of human rights in the digital age. And this is something that I think we've touched on a little bit here and there in the conversations, but it's also another point that is very strongly emphasized in the Secretary General's roadmap. And this is why I think the voices of this extremely diverse NGO community, also hearing from young people, is very important, because the idea of human rights existing both online and offline is something that resonates with us all, and I think has to be part of that fundamental conversation of how we take digital technology forward and best harness it while mitigating its challenges. For instance, I think one aspect that has become very apparent in COVID-19 is the harms of the internet as well as its benefits. So for instance, in COVID-19, there's been an uptick of cyber attacks against the World Health Organization, health facilities. At the same time, there is misinformation that's been spread about the virus, and the fact that in some ways, technology can be used for very negative purposes. The fact that now we are all working and acting online has led to an increase in online cybercrime, as well as the threat of children becoming more vulnerable to online harm, online predators. So again, this is how we as the international community need to come together to address the challenges posed by digital technology, as well as, still harnessing the benefits for the achievement of the SDGs. So I think I'm running out a little bit out of time, but I just want to end by emphasizing this point that the Secretary General's roadmap really is a way forward that we hope to work with all of you, the young people, the technical communities, the scientific communities, UN entities alike, to really bring forward this inclusive multi-stakeholder conversation on how we can harness digital cooperation for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And we really welcome all of you as partners in our work to achieve this multi-stakeholder inclusive approach to harnessing digital technology. And as we look forward to the next 25 years of the United Nations existence, it's interesting to point out that the UN 75 Declaration that will probably be adopted shortly has, for the first time in the UN's history, a very long paragraph about the benefits of digital technology and a call to action on using digital technology while mitigating its challenges for the good of mankind. I think this might be the first time that the United Nations has recognized the need for digital cooperation and digital technology to be part of its agenda going forward. I think it's really thanks to communities like this, where there's been this enthusiasm, this need for action, this imperative for a call for action and a recognition of the importance of these issues that has led to this new understanding among the United Nations community. And so again, I thank all of you for inviting me to this meeting, and I really hope our conversation will continue to flourish and to foster this whole mood of digital cooperation.
Thank you very much. You're keeping us very, very charged and inspired throughout the session. And Miroslav, I pass it over to you for introducing the next part of the event.
Thank you very much, Martin, and thank you also very much, Yuping. It's really your cooperativeness and is really outstanding, and It was very welcoming, the attitude always when we approached you. Thanks for this. And also this roadmap for digital cooperation is really a very good strategic document, and congratulations for this. And with this, we come to the non-technological factors as John said, a lack of imagination of a better world, a different world, different solutions. And here art can help us very much, and especially music is magic. And therefore we are happy and honored to have Genie Lorenson with us, who is a musician and who has been involved in the UN Civil Society Conference in Salt Lake City, had there a performance which shaked everybody up. And he also participated in a climate celebrations concert in September in New York on the eve of the Secretary General's Climate Summit. And it was extraordinarily energizing and really giving the social energy that we need to get everybody engaged in global goals and sustainable development. Genie, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. First, I want to say thank you for having me today. It's always a big honor and opportunity to be with you all, with any individual across the world that is solution driven. You know, so I'm very, very honored to be with you guys today. And I just have a few things that I would like to share with you, and I will round it up with an a cappella of the song that I wrote in Salt Lake while I was attending the conference. When we talk about, you know, climate change, we talk about inclusion. I just want to speak a little bit about the role of the entertainment industry. I literally can tell you that almost every individual in this world has a musician that they listen to. You know, everybody loves music, and music can be used as a tool, you know, as an amplifier, you know, to drive the message, you know, that the world needs to hear right now, you know, because there is something we say that when you're happy, you need music. When you're sad, you need music. When you're looking for solution, you need music. So music is such an important tool, and we can't take away the fact that a lot of our young people engage and look up to role models within the entertainment space. So with that, I'm going to share a little bit of my story, you know, and how I'm able to use music, you know, to drive solution in my country, Nigeria. Currently, I'm based in the US, but I was born and brought up in Nigeria. And at the age of 23, as a young musician in my country, I started championing prison reform. At this point, I didn't see anyone within the entertainment space that was using music as a tool or as a platform to drive the prison congestion, mass incarceration that was going on in my country, Nigeria. And I started using music, you know, to that effect. What did we do? We started organizing concerts inside the prison, bringing all the top musicians and entertainers into the prison to perform. But while we were doing that, we were using that opportunity to talk about and expose some of the issues, you know, that was going on within the prison system. And from there, we started raising funds and we started paying bills for wrongfully incarcerated men and women, and started getting lawyers for those that are in prison and didn't have access to lawyers. Now, looking at me, you would never think that initiative would come from a musician. But look at how we were able to twist and use the power of music to drive such an important aspect of the society. I'm talking about a group of people that are supposed to be included in the society, but because they are behind bars, literally the society has forgotten them. And I'm a big advocate of inclusion. I say it all the time. You know, the only way we can achieve a peaceful society is to carry everybody along. We have to have an inclusive society. That is the only way. So regardless of where you are, regardless of your sexuality, regardless of your personality, regardless of your class, we as a society must collectively watch out for one another. And I strongly believe that with the power of music, we can achieve that goal, because I'm a living testimony. This is 11 years since I started my prison project using music in Nigeria. And now I've been able to introduce the same project into the prisons in America. I've been able to introduce the same idea into the prisons in the UK. If not because of COVID, I'm supposed to be on tour right now in the UK. The UK government approved for me to visit and perform in 10 prisons across the UK. You know, so that tells you how much we can achieve with the power of music. And when I was at the civil society conference in Salt Lake, I was invited, you know, through the Global Communications Department of the United Nations. Big thank you to Awa Diallo. I think she's somewhere around here as well. Her department worked with me, and they brought me to the conference to speak on the importance of using music as a tool to address some of the social issues that we're going through. And I spoke on prison reform. But while I was there, and I'm talking about, I want to tell you how powerful digital is. While I was there for the conference, I had an inspiration, you know, through a conversation I had with one of the staffs of the UN, Mr. Jeff. You know, after my conversation with him, he told me some things about the work of the department and the purpose of the conference. I got inspired. I got inspired to write a new song. But now, I was in Salt Lake. I don't have a studio. I was in my hotel room. I didn't have any equipment. All I had was my phone. I called my producer back in Nigeria, and I said, hey, I have an inspiration. This is a brand new song. We have to record it. I don't know how we're going to do it, but let's make it happen. And I want to perform this song tomorrow at the conference, right? What did we do? I sang the song over the phone. He made the beat, sent it back to me. Using my phone, I recorded the vocals. I had no speaker. I had no microphone. All I used was the inbuilt voice note on my phone. That was how I recorded the United Nations song that I'm going to sing the a cappella. It's also available on all platforms all over the world. I also featured a very good friend of mine, top Nigerian musician on it as well, called his name is Korede Bello, you know. But I was able to achieve that through the power of the digital space and the digital world that we have. I didn't give excuse. I didn't say, oh, I can't achieve this because I don't have a studio. I have my phone, you know, and I made something right inside my hotel room, in my closet. The closet of the hotel, my closet in the hotel room became my voicing booth so that I can achieve, you know, a clean sound. But I used just my phone, sent my vocals back to Nigeria through my phone. My producer mixed and mastered it, sent it back to me, and I got on stage at Salt Lake and performed the song for the very first time. The whole production just took within less than 12 hours, and I was able to perform that song. That tells you how powerful music is, and that tells you how powerful we can use music to drive this conversation, you know, of most of the issues that we're crying, the change that we want. And I'm going to say this before I sing the a cappella. It breaks my heart when I see top government officials going back and forward, deliberating, not being decisive about climate change. We don't have another world. This is the only planet we have. Save the planet. This is, I don't know, this is not rocket science. They make it look like there is an alternative. Do we really understand the fact that we don't have an alternative? Hello, guys, can you hear me?
Yes. I think we lost you there for a bit, but you're back. Thank you, Lamont.
Okay, you know, so this is the only planet we have, and that's why I was very happy when, you know, Mario invited me to perform at the climate change concert in New York. I will support it because we don't have a plan B. That means we don't have, there is no other planet we can run to. So I am pleading with every one of us, both we, the younger ones, the older ones, those in powers, wherever you find yourself, don't just be a part of the conversation, but go beyond just talking. Be part of the solution to ensure that we achieve this climate change that we are crying for, because we don't have another home. This is the only home that we have. Thank you all very much. And I will just round up, by giving you an a cappella of this song that I wrote called United Nations. I'm not living without you. Don't you leave without me. We can shine bright together like the stars in the sky. If I fall, please pick me up, 'cause if you fall, I will pick you up. We are stronger together. We are one forever. 'Cause I am you and you and me. Together we are United Nations. I am you and you and me. Together we are United Nations. Thank you very much for having me. I am you, you and me, and together we are United Nations. God bless us.
Oh. Virtual applause for you from
really wonderful. You are amazing. Thank you very much, Inka. And I hope we will have real concerts also in the context of the mass mobilization for climate action towards the United Nations Climate Change Conference COP26. I love your music, I have to say.
Thank you, Mario. Mario, I know my time is out, but I just want to tell you something today. I want to say thank you for being so passionate and driving this conversation nonstop. I personally watched you in Salt Lake. I watched you when you organized the concert in New York. If everyone can pick up this conversation the way you're driving it, we will not be where we are right now. So I want to say very big thank you to you, Mario, and your entire team, for pushing this conversation forward. And I'm here. Whenever you need me, trust me, I'll be there to perform the United Nations song and any other song that you want from me. God bless you, my brother.
God bless you too. Yeah, great, thank you. And with this, to the next point on the agenda. And for information, we've had a webinar about envisioning a people's COP on the 8th of June with the idea that there is so much that non-state actors can and shall do. And as the conference for climate change that was planned in November in United Kingdom has been postponed for 1 year, we said, okay, but let's see what non-state actors can do independently, more or less independently and complementary, and with the use of digital innovation and digital tools. And Martin has really great initiatives. And we've had this webinar, and now is the time to present some of the outcomes of that webinar and the great work that Martin is doing. Please, Martin.
Yeah, thanks, Miro. And absolutely, I think this situation of 2020 with COVID and everyone being from the intimacy of our homes, producing maybe new opportunities on how do we tackle some of our collective action. What's part of the background of our initiative in the context of this, and started around 2 years ago when we were looking at the role that technology can have in the process of managing our single account that we should all care about, which is our planetary atmospheric carbon budget. And with the onset of decentralization technology, distributed ledgers, blockchains, we were already proposing the use of DLTs as ways of tracking and monitoring that budget. That led us to the project that we launched a couple years ago called Open Climate, which is to develop a trusted open source climate accounting platform to help us deal with the Paris Agreement as it pertains to the next couple of years and the global stocktakes. But building that digital public good platform that enables that level of transparency, which is inherent in the Paris Agreement, is a fundamental, it requires a fundamental collaborative work. It's similar to rebuilding Wikipedia. It has to leverage crowd development. And so in the context of that, last year we launched the Open Climate Collaborathon, flipping out the concept of a hackathon upside down, where teams normally are competing against each other, and rather work on building different pieces of the same puzzle, recognizing that all of those teams and all of those individuals are actually a core stakeholder of the outcome of that digital platform. And we thought earlier this year, as the lockdown was progressing, and particularly as COP26 was postponed, that this was a great platform for us to envision what the Conference of the Parties may look like when people from their homes are actually participating. Normally in a Conference of the Parties, you have a protected area where the plenaries and the official UN observers meet, and then a green zone which is open to the public, but it's always hosted at a specific site. And so perhaps this November, which runs between 9 to the 19th, where COP26 would have happened, is a perfect platform for us to propose a People's COP. And this is part of what Miro and I hosted the webinar to start discussing. I'll just share from our angle how we are thinking about that. I'll just share my screen real quick so that I can invite you to check out the site for the Open Climate Collaborathon. It is in the context of helping develop an open source transparent climate accounting system. There's enough information here to guide you through the process and some of the collective organizers. This actually span off the Yale University lab that I run into an independent collective, which is part of the spirit of that. And so you'll be able to see, well, at least here, Earth Day, review some of the events that happened in the launch of the collaborathon for this year. And then in November event brief, you'll have some information about how we're planning this event in between running from 9 to the 23. Talks a bit about the concept of the collaborathon. We came up with very important specific themes that need to be weaved together in terms of digital networks around climate change, Earth system state, world system registries, and we invite different nodes around the world, universities, to form instances of this initiative, invite participants, form teams, and work between multiple teams on collective prompts and hacks. And all of this is published in our wiki site. So we started off in Earth Day, and then November, this is where a global sprint, we're calling on all developers and experts to participate. It's the fusion between a conference where experts panels come in to provide a lot of context, but also a collective hackathon. And we will launch the first couple of days with open climate dialogues that are specifically introduced the key prompts that we'll host, and then allow onboarding of developers, technologists, and climate scientists to help in the process. So you'll be able to see a bit of the structure for the whole event, focusing on the Paris Agreement and the role of the independent global stocktake, that we think is a very important role for us to re-envision how we participate in the Paris Agreement, how we participate in the COP, by being part of that planetary accounting role. The role of re-envisioning tools for collaboration, for massive collaboration around building open and transparent platforms, emissions, tracking emissions, accrediting mitigations from energy, mitigations from land, certifying adaptation and the important action of adaptation, the role of platform integration, standards and protocols. How do we all speak the same language from a digital standpoint? And then the role of finance. So I invite you to join, check out the process, and there's obviously a wealth of information around this event and this initiative. And you'll also be able to relive some of the videos, as well as we will post the videos. So this is directly from Earth Day and some of the dialogues that we brokered there. So I hope that this also inspires a bit more of ideas to create an unstructured People's Cup where everyone brings in their own piece to, let's say, what Miro calls the virtual green zone. So we were able to provide another angle to how we can run conference of the parties, which by definition are radically changing in their role, because the most important thing around the UNFCCC COPs was to create the massive negotiation that happened in the Paris Agreement. So that was signed. But from now on, it's really up to creating networks of accountability. And that requires a lot of bottom-up action. Miro, over to you with your remarks also on how you saw the results from the event.
Thank you very much, Martin. It's really great work that you are doing, and I will share some additional information about how this People's COP initiative has started and where we are standing. So you see here on the slide an image from the COP25 climate change conference. From the press conference, we have launched the digital cooperation community, and we have Martin there, we have Doug there, and some other friends. Also Neo is there, and it's really the idea that within the climate change governance, there is a need to better integrate the new opportunities of technology, especially digital innovation, blockchain technology, artificial intelligence, integration of Earth observation, which Alex Caldas from UN Environment will speak later. And so there we announced that we will work on two initiatives. One is general data and digital innovation infrastructure for multi-stakeholder climate change, climate action, coordination and incentivization, something very much in line with the digital public good focus of the roadmap for digital cooperation. And the second initiative we announced there was a digital pavilion at the next climate conference, where we would say that the showcase technology and how it can be used, and also open up new opportunities for non-state actors to engage. And the background is that really, if we want to achieve climate neutrality as it's stipulated in the Paris Agreement, we need that everybody commits individually to become climate neutral, very much along the lines that Vienna has also speaking about. UN system tried this, UNFCCC put up a citizens climate pledge, but within 5-6 years, only 5,000 people have signed it, although it was really a good initiative. But also now there's a race to zero campaign for non-state actors. They are talking about businesses, cities, regions, investors, but not about the individual. And so our starting point is that we need a new narrative, and we need also a new social contract. If we today celebrate a UN Charter, that's wonderful, but it is a relatively old social contract, and it's a social contract of national governments, and the emotional relation of the individual citizen with this social contract is very limited. And we say, let's all focus on climate neutrality with our own action. Let's organize communities, thematic and local communities, and use the technology. And sooner or later, a climate action app should be on everybody's device. We have here digital climate pact app, and digital individual climate action dashboard, several versions, one with low integration and low technology use, a second one with a Web 2.0 technology standard. But the vision is that we create a Web 3.0 ecosystem, which would really allow digital measurement, reporting and verification, and then also certification, global registration, using Martin's information systems and connecting with the NASCA Global Climate Action Portal, and much more. And this and many more things can be then organized and looked at and developed further in the context of a People's COP. And so this is our starting point from the digital community. But as at the climate conferences, the side events and exhibits were the most dynamic and interesting thing. And this is now not available in this year. We said, let's also organize a virtual green zone. Let's organize virtual events, exhibits, hubs, very much inspired by the Internet Governance Forum, and really that the non-state actors will have some kind of climate action, coordination, networking event. And also having activities around finance is a very important point, and education, communication, and outreach, and blockchain-based digital communities building. We are setting now a multi-stakeholder planning and coordination team and a secretariat. We hope that the Austrian government, as it has very ambitious climate goals also to become climate neutral by 2040, that they will support us. And if somebody wants to be involved, please send us an email to peoplescopoffice@gmail.com. And with this, I finish my presentation on the People's COP, and there is hope because we are taking the action that we need to take. And with this, I am delighted to have Alexandre Caldas with us, the Chief Country Outreach, Technology, Innovation, and Big Data branch of UN Environment. We've had a first conversation last week, facilitated by Doug, and it's really amazing what you are doing with the World Environment Situation Room and with youth engagement and empowerment. Please, Alex, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Miro, and thank you, Martin, and the organizers for this invitation and to be with you. I'd like first to express a happy UN Charter Day. Today's day is a special day. And to share with you 5 key ideas and your information about the People's COP is fundamentally a good motive for my sharing of these 5 ideas. The first one is that the strong belief that the next 75 years of the world will be fundamentally different, and we have to prepare for that. We have had the very big concern about the planet, and we should really think on these planetary boundaries and how much of the planet, on this one planet we have, that we can keep for the forthcoming 75 years. And that's a very key idea, that is the transformation of lives and people, places, and planet are very much needed, and we have to rethink, reimagine, and do differently for the next 75 years. That's the first key idea I'd like to share with you. And the second one is really, and going a bit further on this concept, the level of complexity that we will be living in the new world that is coming is completely different from the past. The same goes for the level of uncertainty, and the same goes, as Martin well said at the very beginning, the level of interdependence. So we are not going to live in the same world of the previous 75 years. So just to bring 3 dimensions: the complexity, the uncertainty, and the interdependence. And this strongly requires imaginative, new ideas, completely different models, as John was proposing. The hub and spoke model will not work in this world. So we have to change the paradigm, and institutions like UN Environment will have to revolutionize from inside, from the outside, in order to transform in a way that can respond to these complexity, uncertainty, and independence. We are having today, in the last couple of months, the crisis, the humanitarian crisis, the health humanitarian crisis of the COVID. And this is a good demonstration of how badly prepared, how we have to be much better in response, and how the recovery will be different in the future. So all these requires, again, different ways, different value chains, different ways of interaction. Just to give an idea what we have been working on UN environment and with a number of partners around the world, we are thinking about the transformation process, of course, with the goals in mind, the Sustainable Development Goals, and with always giving the power to the member states and the countries, to the people, to the citizens. But we're thinking about novel ways to bring data, knowledge, science to the hands of these actors. So there needs to be a radical transformation. This is happening, and we are putting together what we call the World Environment Situation Room, exactly for that, because we think that the global challenge that we are facing requires situation room, and just like a typical situation room, we have to bring into the situation room the different elements of the situation that we need. And this is going to change radically and needs to be dynamic. To give a clear example, on the climate change dashboard that you can see, that I'm sharing with you, one would imagine that this crisis will diminish and reduce significant CO2 atmospheric concentration, but that's not the case. We have the highest ever atmospheric concentration in the latest month. And so we have to have readily available these indicators, these information, in order that humanity can deal with it. The same goes for sea level rise, the same goes for the global level of temperatures. And all these information seems to be available, but is not acted upon. So we have to have novel models to act.
Alexander, I don't know if you can hear me. I think that you mentioned that you were going to share some screens, but we actually lost your video. And if you are trying to share a screen, we are not able to at least see it through. And wondering if your audio is still running well. Alexander, can you hear me? It seems we lost his audio feed. Let's wait for a little bit to see if he comes back online. Definitely very interesting to see a bit more information of the World Environment Situation Room, and I know that some of my colleagues at DL have been involved with the project, and are very much needed. In fact, it always inspires me to think about how we can at some point use virtual or augmented reality to be able to participate all together in a common world room as a way of video conferencing around a natural room. Perhaps that may be the future of the General Assemblies, where everyone in the world could be an observer and actually being inside a room. Perhaps while we wait for Alexander to solve some of his digital issues on his end, and so far it's been phenomenal, and we are all obviously blessed that people from all around the world have been joining with very good audio and video feeds. In fact, we were also broadcasting live through UN Web TV a little while before. But perhaps we can do a hiatus here, Miroslav, and maybe Yunus Arikani, if he's around, he can go next. And if Alexander and I will be monitoring if he can join again, then we can give the floor to him as well after Yunus, so that Alexander can continue talking about the World Environment Situation Room. That sounds good, Miro. Yes. Yunus, we're inviting you to join. I'll make you a co-host in case you want to share something, and you're free to start your video and share some of the words. Yunus is from ICLE, local authority constituency in ICLE, a very important organization, a very important non-state actor. We'll be sharing around digital cooperation towards globally connected and empowered local communities. And also Yunus was part of the Envisioning the People's COP, which was quite pertaining because cities and local governments are essential in the next phase of how we manage the Paris Agreement and our urgent roadmap to climate action. Yunus, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Martin. I will not use any screen, so I will rather provide verbal interventions. First of all, great thanks and praise to my colleague Miro for this wonderful event, another classic of Miro and his colleagues around the world. I think we should be all proud today in this UN 75 celebration of the UN Charter Day. I looked at the agenda of the UN headquarters webcasts after the ceremony today. This is the only event, and it's an event that connects the past, the future. It brings the hope and it brings the momentum. I think that is really meaningful, and congratulations to all partners. And I'm very excited, of course, to participate. I'd like to build my contributions in three main aspects. One on the psychological or philosophical or sociological connection of the local and regional governments to the world's citizens, but also to the UN system in this today's world. I want to give some examples on how we are connecting to data in the innovation that you have been talking about. Of course, it will also be connected to climate on the way to Glasgow. We, as one of the reasons why we joined your webinar in early June, is that we have announced COP to be in Glasgow to be the multi-level action COP. So that's why your spirit of People's COP fits very well to our thinking as well. Just a couple of words. ICLE is a network of local and regional governments. And in fact, today we are also very excited because ICLE was born under the roof of the UN headquarters in New York City in 1990. And in today's statement from our Secretary General, we were saying that the world, after the Second World War, when the United Nations came into the power, had faced through major breakthroughs, and one of them was 1990s, the era of Cold War and globalization starting. The second one was 2015 and 2016, when the deals for sustainable development was crafted, and nowadays, both in terms of course, the COVID, but also a new momentum that we are hoping that the new normal or the new era that we will build will be enabling us to deliver what we have been praising in terms of sustainability for so many years and decades, so that we will not go back to a normal that we didn't want to be in, but we will be able to develop a new future. In that sense, we would like to see that this is multilateral, of course, multi-level, respecting the Earth's values and ecosystems, but also respecting, or let's say benefiting from the innovation, social and technological innovation of the urban world. And that is maybe one of the most important things. The difference of the United Nations today and 75 years ago, and maybe 75 years later, is that the UN will be in an urban world from now on. Over the last 10 years now, most of our majority of our population is living in urban agglomerations, which is significant. This has happened a couple of thousands of years ago. We all know there were city-states. They were much more before the nation-states in charge, and obviously we were going into a nation-states, but also in the last 200 years we were also in an age of fossil fuels. It was the age of cars, where cities were not too much taking control, and they were mostly reacting, or they were just mostly following what has happened. Whereas the age of sustainability is much more closer because of a decentralized notion. And an example of the fact that if you look at the 1990, all these efforts on sustainability, the cities are embracing it very rapidly because this speaks to their hearts, and that goes to my discussions on the access of the citizens to the local governments, but also the national governments benefiting from the proximity of local governments as their best partners in turning the negotiated diplomatic principles to turn into action. In that sense, local and regional governments really are playing an important role. And this will even be more important in the world in days ahead because of the fact that the local and regional governments have much more power in terms of their social and economical assets, but also the new technologies are enabling them to intervene much more effectively. That brings me these examples of data. When I look back into ICLE's history of the past 30 years, for example, our first initiative was on urban carbon dioxide reduction project at a time when there was no IPCC or guidance on carbon dioxide or GHG emissions, the cities were acting even with the absence of data or information, so that because they were seeing that they don't have the luxury to wait. They have to provide public transport, they have to provide solutions to their waste, and they know the common sense was much more renewable, and that was one of those examples. And again, over these years, for example, in Copenhagen, when the world was in 2009 having difficulties to have commitments, we released a registry of 3,000 commitments of local and regional governments. The same went onward when there were discussion about what is the data and transparency and accountability of the commitments. We have released our registry in 2010 onwards, so that we have thousands of cities now reporting their emissions inventories and making their information publicly available. So transparency, decentralization is hand in hand with the spirit and the legacy of local and regional governments. Maybe one final example is in the sense how technology is also embraced by local and regional governments is that I'm very happy and proud to share with you, because one of your partners is UN Habitat, which is a very close UN institution for us. The current chief of our executive director is a former mayor, Maimuna Sharif, which has been in ICLE governance for a long time, and I've been honored to work with her towards Habitat 3 and onwards. The example she gave was very interesting. She's the mayor of Seberang Perai, a city in Malaysia, an island city. And she was saying that I want to commit to zero waste in my city. And I want to, of course, deliver services. And of course, we have difficulties, capacities, and I was criticized by citizens that a pipeline is not functioning, a road is blocked. And every time she was receiving critics. And there was a youth coming to her and saying that, look, I can help you in terms of sending these commands, and you can track me back and respond to me. And by this communication, the city developed an app on tracking the inquiries of the city, so that this young person have helped the mayor to be much more transparent to their citizens, that any inquiry that comes to the city is immediately tracked, and then when there is a response by the technical teams or the other teams, the mayor could check this on her app, and the citizens would be informed. That strikes me very much, this notion that technology bringing closer to both the administrations, but also solutions which will make us much more positive for the future. That is, of course, scary, but again, this also brings to the climate debate. The things that is now making us positive is the youth power that shook Europe and worldwide over the past couple of years. And last example, again, many of the European cities, including the city that I'm living in, the Bonn, Germany's UN city, the city adopted a council decision on climate emergency in response to the Fridays for Future, the Parents for Future, and the city administration and the city council. Again, this shows that leapfrogging and scaling up actions is much more possible at the local level because of this proximity. And of course, it's also not just the local level, but the local administration being connected to global goals, that being connected to the universal values, that they are not just only their traditional territorial thinking. Otherwise, it will also be detrimental. And we have seen this in the past, in the case of Alberta and British Columbia in Canada, for example, fighting against the pipelines, whether it will be an economical benefit to the other or not, going too much to the extreme of local is also not good. Therefore, this dialogues with the UN, global goals is important. My final words, on the way to Glasgow, we want to develop this local governments with the notion of multi-level action COP, in the sense that Paris Agreement acknowledged all levels of governments as a key actor. So our climate action is not anymore a voluntary commitment, but it is part of our duty. And the new NDCs, but that will be brought, should definitely have local and regional governments' contributions and their commitments and their roles. And unless we don't do this, there will not be a real implementation of the Paris Agreement. And we are positive in the sense that we are seeing from Japan to Rwanda, there are more and more governments are coming to this concept. And with your People's Cup, I think there's a lot of similarities we can bring together with the technology of those new design. I think this presentation you presented on the new ones is very good. In October, we will have our Daring Cities as a preparation to COP26. Maybe we have an exchange of experience and collaboration so that we can test some of your principles. With this, I'd like to thank once again for your invitation, and I'm very happy to be part of this dialogue, and congratulations on this UN 75 with a forward-looking and hope-providing vision. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yunus. We're definitely moving into a non-state actor revolution. It's, like you said, very important for also state actors to empower non-state actors in the context of Paris, because they have the power to do so, as it states in the Paris Agreement itself. Before we move into Timothy Damon from the Global Youth Development, I'd love to give the floor back to Alexander Caldas from UN Environment to share a bit more of the World Environment Situation Room, since we lost him for technical issues. Alexander, if you're coming across well, please feel free to continue a short recap of the World Environment Situation Room, and then you're also free to share your screen if needed.
Thank you so much, Matt. I think you can hear me now. Yes. And I apologize for the technical difficulties before.
No worries.
Let me start to, can you see the screen now?
No.
You can see now?
So I think this may be what happened last time, is what we see is that your video is turned off.
And now the screen?
No. So maybe go to the bottom where it says the green button, share screen, and see if you have
broadcast, but it does not. What about now? No.
No, same thing as last time.
Okay. Unfortunately, I cannot share, but I will share with you the presentation with the link on the chat box. So I'll just focus on 5 key messages. I think
I can put the World Environment Situation Room website and share my screen if that is helpful.
Yes, that can be helpful. Yes.
Okay.
Or I can share in the chat.
World Environment Situation Room. Coming in live to everyone. And so, Alexander, if this is good, you just give me instructions and I'll walk through people.
Fantastic. So basically, 5 key ideas behind this. So we, as you can imagine, for an institution like UN Environment, it's not easy to come with a knowledge platform that can be used for transform the data into action. So basically, the common idea behind this is to turn it like a situation room where you can tackle a crisis, and we are facing a climate crisis, and you can tackle the crisis bringing to the situation room the data, the information, pieces of knowledge that you can. The novelty is that we are planning to have citizens contributing to the situation room, as well as partners around the world that can bring their contents as services, that information into the situation room. So basically, we want to transform these into a world environment situation room where the partnership coming from all over the world can bring the information, either the information in real time, near real time, and these can be shared across the world. So, of course, one critical area will be the citizen science data. Other critical area will be global environmental monitoring data, as in this case, Martin is scrolling around some of these data elements. So basically, the common idea is in order to tackle a global challenge like this, we have to have one global partnership. And we have to have a situation room, a dynamic situation room that pulls in and brings in data, information, knowledge from all over the world. And I think this goes into the direction what was expressed by our colleagues several times during this webinar, that we need to have different models, different imagination, different inspiration models to tackle what is coming next. The traditional way of doing things, where we share common knowledge, is no longer enough. So we have to bring in new models, and a dynamic situation room is one key example. And we're expecting a lot of difficulties and challenges when it comes to reality and to put this in practice. But the whole idea is to make it happen that way. We do think there's a need for the world to understand that the planetary boundaries are there, and we are exhausting in less than 6 months the whole planetary resources that we have for our one planet. So it's critical to tackle the global climate crisis by using novel approaches, by using situation rooms, by tackling preparedness, response, and recovery in a different way. So that's the idea behind it. You have here, of course, as you can imagine, this is an evolving demonstration project, an evolving platform. You can see that behind it, it's not basically about the technology, it's about the social, institutional partnership that is behind it. You can see already a number of partners, and we're expecting this partnership to grow as we move along in the coming years. I'd like to express, we came to this forum, I came to this forum through Doug Reagan, and we are experiencing some of these partnerships with the UN Habitat and the youth engagement by bringing in the youth leadership for climate action. To give you a clear example, the city of Tenerife and municipality of Tenerife demonstrated an interest in having a World Environment Situation Room running in Tenerife. And together with UN Habitat and the Doug Reagan team, we are building this possibility for the municipality of Tenerife to bring in climate information, biodiversity information, to act at the local level. So we do think this is possible, not only at the global level, but at the level of regions, at the level of the localities and municipalities. And that's our idea to share with you. If you can, in the next 75 years of the UN, have many different situation rooms covering not only the environment, but other dimensions. One key idea, I think, we don't want to focus on the environment. We want the environmental knowledge to be used to tackle the nexus of peace, development, and humanity. Because we think the nexus of the UN, the strong connection of the three pillars, can be the driving force for the next 75 years. And with this, I'd like to wish you all a happy UN Chat today with a fantastic innovation for the next years. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Alexander, and a great showcase of how the UN on one side makes a very strong point around the role of digital public goods. And this is an example of how to put that into practice with also a vision for a crowd-developed digital public good and world environment. And that obviously connects to also our project on open climate as it pertains to a climate environmental situation room, but more of like a Paris and the political accountability tracks of that. So much to learn, and many of these platforms also to be developed. And with that, perfect segue into Timothy Damon from the Global Youth Development Institute in Education, Communication and Outreach Community, ECOS, who we've also had the opportunity to liaison on the last conference in Madrid. ECOS had a lot of presence there. Timothy, go ahead, please, the floor is yours. Happy to have you. Timothy, can you hear me? I see him frozen in the video screen. I'm not sure if Wiseman Makizi will also speak next to Miroslav, but we can start getting some of our next speakers ready as well. You mentioned, oh, I think we got
now Tim is back.
Hi, Miro. Hi, Martin.
Wiseman, if you give us just a second, I think Timothy is trying to connect his audio, and if he does, I think you should be able to speak now, Timothy.
Yes, thank you. Having some connection issues as well, but we'll overcome those. So I think this year is, especially with everything going on right now, an important one to take stock as we are with the 75th anniversary of where have we come from, but then also where is it we still need to go. And looking back to where we've come recently, you know, my own first serious experience with the United Nations was the climate negotiations in Durban at COP17. And at that point in time, it seemed that countries were so incredibly far away from being able to come to any kind of consensus or common position on how to even tackle climate change. And yet just a few years later, we ended up managing to get the Paris Agreement. And young people were a key driving force in being able to get that agreement. And in fact, one small accomplishment out of that was that we had the Paris Agreement be the first international treaty to recognize intergenerational equity as a principle, something that really is at the core of the work that we're trying to do, and at the core of the work of the United Nations, is to be serving the interests of future generations as well as people today. So now, of course, the emphasis is on how do we manage to implement and realize all those commitments from the Paris Agreement. And this is where partnerships with Miro and the Global Challenges Foundation and all of us are incredibly important, because young people have, for all these years, even before the Fridays for Future movement and such really kicked it more, have been pushing their best to deliver climate action, to raise awareness, to ensure public participation. But there's a lot of continued gaps and barriers which they're facing in being able to do that. And these are technical resources, financial resources, institutional resources. And all of these are things that we could address going forward, as well as providing more scope in governance for young people to really be fully participating in those decisions and in the future of the UN as a structure as it continues to evolve. And that really is what's going to be crucial here. I mean, the investment that we could be making in young people is going to pay the most dividends. It's already the one which is most important, and we can catalyze those youth activities very concretely if we did have more of the resource mobilization for that, and really making sure that we have this strong framework to build the capacities of young people to be able to then utilize those resources as well. You know, some young people, you know, have established NGOs and, you know, they know how this process works, but many of them, and especially when I speak to a lot of the even younger youth who are coming up to take the baton after my generation, you know, they're still having many questions, and they need to make that transition from doing a school strike to leading a climate project in their school, in their community, in really delivering action at all scales, but especially that local level and at that city level that Eunice was mentioning. So we need to put that in place. We need to sort of
We lost Timothy's feed. I think he's speaking directly from the General Assembly, so maybe there's some connectivity to the General Assembly from the background. Let's just wait a little bit more, see if he's able to reconnect, since he was able to do that before, at least to wrap up some of his very important talks. I think we have you back, Timothy. Please go ahead. Oh. Okay, I think we have lost him altogether. Timothy, let's see. I'm going to mute you, see if you can speak now.
All right, good. I was almost done anyway, so just to reiterate my closing remark there, you know, we need to help make sure that especially the new young people coming up, as well as those who have been in the process for a while, will be able to start making the biggest impact that they can as soon as they can, because we really can't afford to wait for these young people doing strikes to, you know, for it to take sort of 5 or 10 years for them to grow up in the process of doing this. They need to do it now, and I trust that they're ready to grow up and do it now if we'll just give them the intergenerational support and resources that they need in order to do it. And I'm certainly still inspired, along with Miro and everyone here, to make that happen, and together I know we can make it happen. So celebrate 75 years, but let's make the next 75 even stronger and get humanity where it really needs to be this century. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, Timothy. Great. And Wiseman, if you are ready, please go ahead. Great to hear from you.
Hi, Martin. Thank you very much. Greetings to you and Miro. It's such a pleasure for me to be part of this important dialogue. I'm Wiseman. I'm from South Africa. And for me, there is nothing much to say. I come from a music background, and thanks to Miro for having been a guide, a mentor. I'm the lead representative of IAI in South Africa. And for the last hour or so, listening here, sitting here, and listening to all these wonderful speeches and presentations, I'm just wowed, you know, to see we're coming from Africa and there's so much that is happening around the world, and there's so much that we could be contributing as the country, as the continent. I'm very also moved by the presence of Mr. Eric Appelgren from the city of Durban, and it means I'm delivering Miro, slowly but surely delivering to ensure that what you had appointed me to do in South Africa, it's starting to move on. And also we'd love to have more cities of the country joining in, because this is such an important platform so that Africa as the continent is not left out, you know. I was there at the UN Climate Action Week. I attended a beautiful concert in New York last year. And actually, after what Lamborghini has just said, I don't think there's nothing much for me to add, because his performance just wowed all of us there. And his songs, the young people who came, I think they were coming from California. They were composing songs about climate change. So it was also moving, and the representatives from the sub-national government that I'd come through with, we were all taken aback and said, we need to ensure that South Africa is part of this, especially KwaZulu-Natal. I'm so happy that now I've just recently joined the city of Durban under governance and relations, where I work hand in hand with Eric. Actually, just this morning, he has said, Wiseman, we need to have, actually it's been already organized a meeting with the whole department of our international governance to say, what is it that we can be doing to support what you guys have started? The passion that I'm seeing here, the level of knowledge from everyone who's here, it says to us, we cannot be left behind as the city of Durban. We cannot be left behind as South Africa. I come from the music background. I come from the choral music. I've got a choir that is 28 years now. And after seeing that concert in New York last year, I was working so hard to ensure that the Claremont Choir was going to be at the next UN Climate Week. But unfortunately, COVID. It's what it is, and we've got to find a new normal. I want to also echo the sentiments from Lamborghini that music is such a powerful tool. If we want to catch our young people, of course, it's very important that we do art and culture. It's such an important element. So I pledge the support. We'll do our best. And thanks for having me here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Wiseman. Great words. And coming over to the end, Miro, I think that we had a slot for some Q&A and discussions from the audience. We think we have some time there.
I would suggest that we first give the floor to Neo and Catherine, and Marla is also here with some interesting thoughts on gamification. So, and then we extend over time in the discussion.
Great.
I would suggest Neo first.
You can go first, and Catherine Foster in the audience. If you have some words, you can go after that as well, Marla.
Okay, since Miro and since Martin is a wonderful webinar, and it's my honor to be here, I want to share my screen. I have the PPT for this. For me. Okay. So can you see my screen?
Yes, but
it's not.
Maybe you can center your keynote a bit further to the left because we're just seeing your format tab.
Okay.
If you go to full screen, we should be able to see the whole thing.
Okay, so is that okay now? Okay.
No, just maybe go to present at Keynote.
Present Keynote here?
Yeah, we're just seeing half of your screen on your Keynote.
Oh, have a screen of my Keynote, right? So maybe here.
I don't see your mouse moving at all. Oh.
Okay, maybe just talk. Maybe I can talk without the presentation. Yeah. Okay. My name is Neil. I'm from China, and we are developing the blockchain solution for the CAM action. And as you know, I think the key factor for the CAM action is the participation of developing countries, because for developed countries responsible for the 63% of the global CO2 emission, and China is the biggest emitter for the world. So I think if we can tackle the CO2 emission in developed countries, then we can have a successful movement of climate action. I want to take China as an incident. 2 years ago, there is a survey by the magazine called China Dialogue. And it made a survey to Chinese people about the awareness of climate change. And over the 80% of people in China, they know about the climate change. But less than 30% of people, they know very well about it. So that means that most of the Chinese people, they have a vague impression to the climate change, but they don't know how to really involve here. And I think the similar condition happen in other developed countries. But curiously, even under that situation, hopeful for the Chinese people, they say they're willing to spend more than $15 annually to offset their CO2 emission. That means that for a huge population of Chinese people, China can contribute $10.5 billion for climate action a year by those individuals. That equal to a quarter of global carbon pricing market, include carbon trading and carbon tax. So we are thinking about, we want to tackle these two issues. One is how to increase the awareness of climate change to people. The second is how to make a way to let people can directly participate in the climate action. There are two solutions initiated by us. One is Equal to Ledger. Equal to Ledger is a public blockchain designed for individual carbon market. And in like a blockchain system, we provide a blockchain-based carbon account and transaction system, and blockchain-based carbon neutral system, and blockchain-based carbon credit on-chain system. Based on this, we want to make a decentralized, transparent way to let people can directly have their carbon account based on blockchain. Especially, China sometimes kind of isolate from the global society, and the blockchain is help them can directly participate the global climate action. And the other application is My Carbon app. It's a personal carbon account, could be used in cell phones app. And people use it, they can doing the carbon trading in their cell phone, and they can doing the carbon neutrality in their cell phone. And also we provide an educational tool to educate people who are not familiar with the climate change. Right now in this app, within the first 6 months, since the last November, totally it offset 2,600 tons CO2 by those users. we hope by Equal to Ledger and My Carbon app, it can become kind of a connection from the individual to the global climate action and build out a blockchain-based climate network. People can use their cell phone to directly participate in the blockchain network, which is a part of global climate action and formed by those individuals. For our app, right now we have 1.1 million users, and we predict we can have 3 million users at the end of the year. And about our public blockchain, Equal to Ledger, the testnet is under test. It will be completed before the end of this year, so our mainnet will be officially online at least the end of this year. At that time, we hope our community can promote this idea that everyone in the world can own their own carbon account, and they can directly pay the carbon account from the emission reduction project proponent, and also they can directly offset on the blockchain network, which is full, decentralized, transparent, and non-fungible. And by this blockchain solution, we are thinking it can enhance the bottom-up architecture for Paris Agreement. Currently, the Paris Agreement only approach to the government, let the government commit to their NDC. But with blockchain technology, the Paris Agreement can bottom up start from the individual and enterprise. And since if we can have an individual on the blockchain network, then an enterprise will definitely affected by their consumer. So they will definitely join into the climate action. And all the offsetting, all the carbon trading will be all on blockchain, which is full, transparent, and decentralized. Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Neo. Maybe we have some more time for Catherine and Marla to share some words. Catherine, maybe you can go next. Great to have you.
Thank you.
If you're ready, Catherine. Sorry. You're still muted. Yeah, you're
great. Thank you. I'm so pleased to be here and to have listened with enthusiasm to all of the interventions in the spectrum of, the collaborative, creative approaches as well as the technology. So I'm very grateful to just be able to provide just a few bookend comments here. Can you hear me? Yeah?
Yes.
Great. So those of you that know me as a sort of broad focused person. I've been spearheading systems innovation at the nexus of technology, policy, climate change, sustainable development for over 25 years. And most recently, with the Green Digital Finance Alliance, the UNEP Ant Financial NGO that was established. And I was previously one of the leads of Climate Kick, helped build out the World Bank Blockchain Carbon Markets Framework, and even started, co-founded a startup which won MIT Solve. But a lot of you don't know that I actually started my career as a Canadian diplomat. And I was one of the first Métis Indigenous persons in the system. And my focus then was on climate and human security, which in the 90s was a really brilliant framing of the environmental urgencies, the conflict, gender, child rights, human rights, conflict diamonds, landmines, was all under this umbrella. And what we actually managed to do then was quite dynamic. We managed to bring in youth as experts, not just as witnesses to UNGA. It was the Canadian delegation with a few of the human security networks that got youth recognized as stakeholders, as experts, as part of the problem definition and solution building, rather than just passive voices or as victims. And in this process, we also brought in technology and music. And I'm laughing because technology at the time was satellite phones and video booths, and we got MTV in to host the conferences. So It was a refreshing change from the previous diplomatic approach of NAFTA public consultation processes, which were quite stale and stalwart and very homogeneous, shall we say. And what I've learned in technology in recent years is basically been about diversity inclusion. We have to consider age and access, as many of you've noted. And what I've seen is a lot of coaching of individuals to participate and to be heard and to pitch. But I think we also like to focus on actually coaching the institutions themselves and shifting the jury's perceptions and the vetting of the technologies to ensure that we're being more inclusive and diverse. And I think, you know, for example, one way to include younger women is to also include older women, such as myself, because we've been through those barriers, we've seen those visions. So I think it is really about diversity and problem holders coming in. In terms of the solutions we're seeing in building out, I absolutely agree. It's about working with incumbent solutions without being bogged down by them. And we basically cannot have this fourth revolution without recognizing not only the issues of access and the digital divide, but the inclusion factors. And again, as problem solvers, not just as witnesses or victims. So I think that's really important. And I really appreciated the comments on knowledge management and interconnectivity and interoperability, not just within technology, but with legacy issues. And without being complacent about them or perpetuating those gaps. We think of innovation, the way I've seen innovation built out in the climate kick, where I was one of the leads, was to try to replicate Silicon Valley. And we're seeing the cracks emerge around that type of model. And collaboration and consortium building are absolutely starting to ripen. And SDG 17 is actually partnerships, collaborations, but it is the one where we see the least, we hear the word all the time, but we don't see the tools emerging. So this is what I urge, that we need to share those tools around diversity, around inclusion, around interoperability and interconnectivity, rather than keeping to reinvent the wheel and re-emphasizing. We need to build those along these platforms as well. So I'm really looking forward to working with Martin on Open Earth and the other initiatives, and with Miroslav on yours. And I'm looking forward to the rest of the comments and questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Nice final comments. And Marla, please share some of your angle as well.
And then if we may switch on the cameras of everybody before Wiseman also leaves, so that we make a group photo, that would be good.
Great idea.
Please, everybody turning on the camera. Wonderful. So very good, and that's, I think there is a possibility to have only those who are active cameras. But anyway, so happy 75th anniversary of the UN Charter. Yeah. Okay.
Great.
Perfect. Okay, one more. Perfect. Marla, please.
Thank you.
So, can you hear me?
Yes.
So hello, thank you very much for having me. It's an honor. I'm Marla Bogener. I'm based in Geneva, Switzerland. I'm a social entrepreneur and a pioneer. I started working with gamification to change behaviors for collective climate action back in 2011. So because of my early work, I had a lot of data and I was able to analyze them when no one wanted them. And of course, my data was anonymized to begin with. I was not selling data per se, I was selling intelligence out of the data on how can we save resources at an individual level, but then measure impact collectively. And because of that, I was later invited to, much later, to Co-op 24 to present my work, and I'm going to try to share my screen. Ta-da. So this is actually on my website. So it's a little bit what Catherine just said. It's how do these models and projects for the SDGs or the projects that work with sustainable or environmental or social impact, how come that the Silicon Valley model doesn't apply? And so I came up with a systemic that I presented at COP24 to show that data should be treated like a patrimony, and we should use and treat data in a way that creates a virtuous circle, so that basically you use the data to understand, to create collective intelligence or have intelligence out of them. And based on this intelligence, you create services or new projects. And it's a circle whereby the first data are then used to better understand what people or participants are doing or how they consume or so on. And then based on this info, you create new services and they use the services, and again, you get more data. So this is, in a nutshell, my work as a social entrepreneur. But right now, I just started a doctorate in business administration and sustainability at SUMAS Business School in Switzerland. And I will focus my research on, so first of all, the COVID provided us with the proof that collective action for climate change works on a massive scale. So my research will look at how can we possibly replicate such an impact, but in a more democratic way. How can we use bottom-up data wisely? Can we replicate this massive behavior change in a sustainable way and democratic way? Is it possible? What's needed? Of course, collaboration is needed. We know that tackling climate change will not happen alone. We need all these systems to collaborate. So my research is how could we reproduce such an impact? And also I'm very curious to be part of the co-op, of the people's co-op, to know what your feedback is on this preliminary research topic. Is gamification on a massive scale still interesting? How can we collaborate? If you have any questions, I guess I still have a minute left.
Great.
Thank you very much, Marla. And I've shared in the chat window also, I'm convinced that gamification is really the key to getting the social energy and mobilization and passion mobilized. And I've shared in the chat window also the link to the Climate City Cup, an initiative of the ETH Zurich, also co-sponsored by Climate Kick, which has been also co-founded by IAI Glotcher. And I'm sure that this will also be part of the solution for all of society, digital cooperation for global goals.
Mm-hmm. And I'm also a climate coach, and I was invited because I was one of the only ones to have data on accelerating the SDGs with behavior change and gamification. I was also part of a panel at the ITU Global AI for Good conference last year. So there is interest and it is relevant, but now how can we take it, how can we make this a 21st century project, you know, post-COVID project? Everything we should take action and learn from this unbelievable time we're living.
Excellent.
Thank you.
If I may briefly ask also the colleagues from the ECOS community and also somehow partners for the People's COP, Frank Granshaw and Mark McCaffrey, if they would like also to share some points. Frank, you have to unmute. Okay, we have you.
Okay, I'm totally unprepared for this, but I'll try to keep it quick. So my name is Frank Grange. I'm from Portland, Oregon in the Western United States. I'm really pleased to be here and hear what is happening pretty much around the globe. This is fantastic. I'm involved with a project through Greater Portland Sustainability Education Network, a United Nations University affiliated regional center for expertise in the state. In sustainability education, and you have to learn how to say all of that to be part of the organization. Anyway, one of our big efforts last year was to do a virtual bridge to COP25, which meant public gatherings or nice little. One of the other speakers brought up the idea of a hub. So essentially, what we had was a couple of gatherings where there was live video conferencing connection with folks on the ground in Madrid, and it was successful enough that we are looking at doing a bridge to COP26, as well as, which means expanding our local bridge, but also encouraging other communities to pick up the ball and do similar efforts. And we're talking with 3 other communities, one in India, one in Australia, one in Denver, to do the same. And we now have a guide out for doing that. So if you are interested, feel free to look me up.
Yeah, and you've had also great ideas around augmented reality, and this kind of tools are also something that really connects better than with humans' emotions and those parts in the brain that are triggering action. Yeah, so great work. Mark, would you like to say something?
Thank you, Miro. I'm Mark McCaffrey. I am living in north central Hungary near the Slovakian border. It's actually quite windy out and the dogs are a little restless, so I'll keep this very short. But thank you, Miro. Thank you, Martin, and everyone who contributed. This has been enlightening and really interesting to know what all is going on around the world, and to see that there's a lot of overlap and a lot of talent and a lot of urgency that we can build on. I think I'm involved with ECOS, the United Nations Climate Change Education, Communication and Outreach Stakeholders Community. And I know some of you are familiar with that. If you'd like a little more information, go to climateecos.org. And we have some really exciting upcoming talks. We have weekly community calls every Wednesday at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Central European time, which is 11 o'clock East Coast, and 10 o'clock in Beijing, China. So you can visit our website for more details about that. And July 8th, actually, we'll be having a presentation that I'll be involved with about a Powers of 10 paper, which we recently had published in the journal Environmental Research Letters. And what we did is we took the natural framework of 10 orders of magnitude between a single individual and everybody on the planet, 1 person, 10 people, 100 people, on up to closing in on 10 billion people, and use that as a way to analyze the range for sort of optimal or most suitable fit for a lot of different climate strategies, climate interventions. And what we found is that the community scale of 10,000 people, 100,000 people, which many of your organizations are working in, ICLEI and so forth, and many other organizations work at sort of this community-based scale. That's where the sweet spot is for a lot of this action. So I've put a link in the chat window about an essay that provides some background on this, and then you can please join us for our webinar, our ECOS community call meeting coming up on July 8th. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mark. Miro?
Yeah, so I would just like to express my gratefulness for everybody to investing your time, sharing your ideas, and if there's anybody who would like to say some concluding remarks, please do so. I, for myself, I'm inspired and grateful and hopeful.
Definitely, same here. Thank you everyone for having joined. Thank you for all the participants. Thank you for bringing all of yourself and all of your message. That's been resonating to everyone that's been participating here. And I think it resonates outwards with the vibrational frequency that everyone brought in. So thank you very much. It was very much appreciated. And also thank you very much, Miro, for having the persistence to making this happen, as merely helping with the space. But I think you also drove a very beautiful community. So virtual applause to you as well.
It's a really beautiful community. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Great work for us waiting. Yeah?
And enjoy the birthday.
Yeah. Bye.
I will be posting the video soon, and we'll do a follow-up over email so that we can grab opportunities for the community to stay connected and ways for engagement in the different events throughout the year, with a big focus around November, let's say uprisings, people's COP, and ways to accelerate a more participative climate action and climate policy engagement.
Thank you so much, Miro, Martin, and everyone.
Thank you, Miro and Martin. Thank you.
Happy to stay connected too. So.
Bye-bye, thank you.
Bye-bye, thanks.
Also, thank you very much from South Africa in Durban. It was such a pleasure for us. Thank you.
Thank you.